Tarkesh Shah, and here we'll talk about an interesting development that took place in the Supreme Court this morning. We have Tushar Jain joining us to discuss the same. So, Tushar, the apex body dismissed a petition seeking the transfer of donations from the PMCares fund to the National Disaster Relief Fund this morning. For starters, why don't you explain to us the differences between these two schemes?
Well, see, I think for a long time, people have been asking that why can't we transfer the funds to the NDRF or, for instance, PMNRF, right? But the problem here is not about the NDRF or PNRF or PMCares. What people essentially want is that why is a separate fund in the name of PMCares being initiated in the first place? That's the one question I've been getting from a lot of places. A lot of people have been asking that if there is an PMNRF, which is the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, which is already there since 1948, why do we need a new fund? Tarkesh, the first aspect, and probably why the Supreme Court also knocked down this petition, was there's a difference in the management. Now, if I go back to 1948, the Indian-Pakistan partition had just happened. There was a need for a fund which could help the families that had been displaced from Pakistan had just come here. And the National Relief Fund has played that role over decades. You cannot just ignore its role. But with PMKs, the management is entirely different. Now, when the PMNRF, which was initiated in 1948, it was made, the management of the PMNRF was such that it made the Prime Minister the judge, the executioner, the jury, everything. It was all about the PM. He could outsource the work to a secretary who could take care of the allocation of the donations and so on. But at the end, the ultimate power resided with the Prime Minister. And this was for all the decades. Now, what has happened with PMCares? One, that the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, of course, he's the chairperson, of course, he's the trustee, he's one of the trustees, he's the head. Of course, any sanctioning of funds requires his approval. But he's also delegated the task to three other ministers in his cabinet, namely Amit Shah, Rajnath Singh, and Nirmala Sitharaman, which is your Home Minister, your Defense Minister, and your Finance Minister. So even though the Prime Minister has all the right when it comes to allocation of the funds, as it is in the PMNRF, there's a more delegation of funds here, more delegation of duty here, which takes into account more people maybe while making the decision. And that is one way the PMCares is different from PMNRF. That's one aspect. Now, the National Relief Fund, Tarkesh, when it was made for, of course, people who had been displaced by the partition. But over the years, it has been used for a lot of other purposes, and rightfully so. It's a National Relief Fund. So it's not for any specific purpose. It has been used for riots, people who have been impacted by the riots, people who have been impacted by floods, earthquakes. So it's been used over and over for a lot of purposes. The PM Cares Fund, when it came out in March 2020, when it was initiated rather, Tarkesh, the idea was to create a fund specifically for COVID-19, to manage the COVID-19 outbreak. So people who are actually asking that, oh, why can't we transfer the funds to NDRF, to this, to that, or why do we even need PM Cares? This is a very specific fund for COVID-19. Now, why do you need a fund for COVID-19? Some might ask. Well, we have been feeding 80 crore people from April to November in this year. You need funds for things like that. You need funds for injecting capital into the economy and a lot of things. I mean, I'm just giving some stray examples, but you need capital for a lot of things. And this is what this fund was set up for a very specific purpose, which is COVID-19. That's all.
All right, but isn't it true that the relief fund is audited by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, unlike the PM Cares Fund? So, what is your take on the whole lack of transparency issue in this case?
Yeah, Tarkesh, this is a common misconception going around. Let me tell you that. If I go by a recent report in the Business Standard, firstly, it said that for the last few years, the CAG wasn't actually auditing the reports of the PMNRF. There were third-party auditors doing that. So let's address that one aspect going by the Business Standard report. The second aspect is, who has said that the statements of the PM Cares won't be audited? The Prime Minister, as a trustee, he'll appoint a third-party auditor and the statements will be audited as they must be. So I don't know where the auditing debate has really come up from.
That's true. I think Sonia Gandhi reiterated earlier regarding the necessity of setting up an alternate fund when you already had the Prime Minister and the NRF existent since so long. What do you have to say on that?
See, a lot of opposition people, they were expecting COVID-19 to be the end of the NDA2 government. I'll be honest. We've seen how politics works in India. It's always political opportunity before solving a crisis. Now, when the Prime Minister set this fund up, you saw the incoming of money. You saw how people pledged money to these funds, from your Bollywood actors to your Tatas. Everyone was pledging money to this fund. And I think in 6 weeks, the PMCares got more money than PMNRF got in 2 years. So I think the opposition had a problem. Sonia Gandhi, Mamta Banerjee, everyone was questioning the need. But little did they realize that this was a very specific fund for a very specific cause. But here's the funny part. The Sonia Gandhi angle has something to do with the management committees of the PMNRF. When Jawaharlal Nehru made PMNRF, for some odd reason, one of the members of the management committee was to be the Congress president. Now, this is the interesting part. One of the members of the management committee was to be a Congress president, and still is. Now, why is that? Why does either you have presence of all the political parties if you want to go that route, though it's not an ideal route, but if you want to do that, have presence of all the national political parties. But no, we have a president of the Congress party on the PMNRF, which is why probably Sonia Gandhi is very angry about the existence of PMK's fund.
Yeah, that's true. And speaking of the Gandhis, I think you have some details of the NRF to the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation mysteriously on multiple occasions in the past. Why don't you put some light on that?
Interestingly, when you remember the time when the apps were banned, just I think a month ago, 59 Chinese apps were banned. And suddenly people were very vocal that, oh my God, how can you ban an app like TikTok or whatever if they've just donated to the PMCares fund? But what people actually missed is that 2005, 2006, 2006, 2007, and 2007, 2008, one of the donors to the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation, a private foundation, was actually the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund. Now, this is sort of very shocking because how can you have funds which is under the Prime Minister's office, under the PMO, it is audited by the CAG, diverting funds to a private organization? Why is that happening? This is no less than a scam, Turkish. Let me tell you that. We have been not alien to the scams which have come out of the Congress closet, especially the second tenure, but this is going back to the first tenure. Why were funds diverted from Prime Minister's National Relief Fund, which were meant for the poor people of India, which were meant for people struck by droughts in those years, struck by floods, struck by earthquakes, to the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation? And even if those funds were diverted, what happened to those funds? What was done to those funds? So the people who are questioning the PMCares fund today, who are questioning the integrity of Narendra Modi, they themselves have a lot of questions to answer, especially about the money that was diverted in a very suspicious manner.
All right. Lastly, this petition was filed in the Supreme Court by the NGO Center for Public Interest Litigation, that is headed by Prashant Bhushan. What do you make of this body that seems to be consciously working to somehow legally disrupt any initiative taken up by the central government?
Well, I think some people in black coats, they have a habit of judicial activism. Prashant Bhushan, we know his history with the Aam Aadmi Party. And after his history with the Aam Aadmi Party, to be honest, Turkesh, I don't want to take his petition seriously. Just very recently, the Supreme Court held him for the contempt of court. Prashant Bhushan is one person, he doesn't trust the government, he doesn't trust the judiciary, he doesn't trust his own political party which he joined. So I think for some people, just creating noise, an idle mind is a devil's workshop. I think that holds true for people like Prashant Bhushan who don't want to do anything. They have no merit to their ideas, to their claims, and just want to disrupt something which is being done for the people of India in a very transparent manner. They want to, create controversies out of nowhere, and fortunately, they have not been successful so far, and doesn't look like they'll get a lot of ground in the future too for their ideas.
Thank you very much. That's it from this episode of Swarajya Direct Line. Please join us in other episodes to talk about other issues. Thank you very much.